Hello, Hambini fans, and welcome to today's episode of the NERO Show, featuring the man himself, Hambini.
Now, we have checked and the pen is working, so we're going to ask Hambini what are the most underrated brands and what he would be buying in 2025.
We're also going to get into a bit of a discussion about, does aero testing actually matter? What kind of differences actually make a difference out on the road?
Hambini tries to convince me rim brakes are still the way to go, and I'm going to try and convince him tubeless is his best option going forward. All right, let's get into it.
We talk about aero testing and aero bikes and stuff like that a lot on the show. So I thought we would get you on and to start off with, get you to fact check me on stuff I've said in the past. Because I am aware that there is a potential massive Dunning-Kruger effect in everything I say regarding aerodynamics. So I've kind of paraphrased or quoted myself on stuff can remember I've said recently. And let's see if you think I'm right, wrong, or miles off. Trek chose to show the 35 km/h wind tunnel results because it suited the new Madone. If they tested at higher wind speeds, the old Madone would likely be faster because it has deeper tube shapes. Is that correct or incorrect?
I'm going to say that's correct because generally speaking, if you got a deeper tube shape, it's more effective at higher speed, so the difference becomes greater. So, you've got this thing called thickness to chord ratio. That's, like you said, the deepness. So I'm going to agree with you, Jesse.
Okay.
Bear in mind, my fact-checking could be utterly bollocks, because loads of people on various forums on there just think I'm a complete twat. So, there you go. But yeah, I agree with you.
Well, as from one twat to another twat to another twat, let's just accept that we're right in this particular scenario and go to the next one.
The Tavelo Aero would be faster than the Envy Malay because it's narrower from the front, has a deeper head tube, deeper fork, and narrower and deeper down tube. And I said it's faster. Don't need to test it. Am I think correct or wrong?
That would be a statement that you get out of the Daily Mail or some other newspaper like that. So, jest aside, I think it's correct because if you make something narrower, you are generally going to make it less draggy. If you make something wider, in order to make it less draggy, you have to improve the shape. And all things being equal, then a narrower object is generally going to be faster.
Okay. Let's see if I got one more. Chris, maybe, I don't know if you got any others. I didn't mean to just ask ones I thought you were going to say was correct, but maybe you got something to pick with this last one. So I said the Aero Orca Aero is a dog of a bike because it looks fast, but Tour Magazine tested it at 212 watts, which is 3 watts slower than an SL8 and 10 watts slower than the top performing World Tour bikes. Is that maybe not fair in some way?
The Tour test can be quite skewed, and that's just from my personal experience of sticking me and myself in a wind tunnel, because these days the handlebars tend to be integrated, so it kind of moves your position into what the bike manufacturer wants. So you might end up with something that's, let's say, a size 52 that makes the Aero Orca really, really fast, but when you go to a 58, it's now become a dog of a bike because those tube shapes do not scale very well. And I think that's something that the Tour test, how they would need 1,000 bikes to be able to cover every permutation. So you can't fault them for that. Mm-hmm. But that is quite a big deviation. So I would take that sort of 2 watts, 12 watts, and then put it into context. So I don't necessarily agree with you on that. The frame size makes quite a big difference. So if I use an example, Peak Torque, he is extremely tall. Now, if you put him on a certain bike, he'll be faster than another bike, and that differential will be quite big because of his size and because of the frame. If you go to a very small bike and put a small rider on it, the difference between bikes of, roughly the same dimensions won't be that big because they're physically smaller, and the bike tubing has less effect. Because when you scale the bike, the distance between, if you're looking side on, the head tube and the seat tube is actually getting bigger. But the tube profiles have stayed the same. So if you've lengthened the tubes, because if you're looking at it, you had to increase the reach. That has an effect, and it's quite a dramatic effect. Easily between the 2 watts, you could easily do that. And then you factor in like crank length. So if you are using a 175 crank length, 175 on an Orbea Orca will be a different drag number to a 165 on an Orbea Orca, because as your foot moves past critical features like the down tube, or if you've got some crossover between the back of the front wheel and your foot, each time you're going round, that drag number changes slightly. So that's the practical elements of it. Now, as a practical engineer, would I go to that length of detail? Probably not. But you're going after the 2 watts, and there's plenty of people on forums who do. I wouldn't really worry too much of it. But is it a dog of a bike? I mean, Orbea had another one of my review videos removed after I suggested something about a certain group in the Basque Country. So yeah, it probably is a dog of a bike. Fuck that.
Okay.
The handlebar thing's interesting. So, sorry, can I just quickly, that handlebar thing, not to derail it too much, but you mentioned that in your SL8 breakdown, where you were saying you were comparing the SL7 to the SL8, and you just made this sort of throwaway comment of like, oh, I'd always take the 2-piece bar and stem just because it allows you, the rider, to be put in a more suitable position. You like that as opposed to the integrated bar and stem where you're being forced into the position that the bike is putting you into. So that to you, that is a genuine performance. There's some watts to be found there.
Yeah, I mean, if you fit comfortably onto the handlebars that the manufacturers provided and they are one piece and integrated, the win-win bonus. The difficulty comes when most people aren't going to fit into that envelope. So they will need that sort of micro adjustment to lift this and trim that. But a lot of bikes these days, let's be honest, are sold on how they look. And the integrated one-piece bars look and shiz. Whereas the old school stem with the round bar is not in fashion anymore. So
I get that. I just saying like, it's kind of a bit of a cop-out though, to be like, oh, that new feature that made a bike faster is actually not any good because it might not fit you. But what if you buy the bike from a shop, most of the time they'll let you swap out the bar and stem for the one that you want, which is it is a faff, and then you end up with the correct dimensions and a slightly marginally faster bike, which you paid $15,000 for. Isn't that what you're paying for? Because everyone's dropping big coin on bikes these days. So don't you want the fastest? Not kind of the fastest, but it fits me?
But you could argue that if you took a simple example, seat posts, for a while they were integrated seat posts where the rider had to cut the frame basically and then put the seat post on. We've moved away from that again, and now they're moving back to seat posts that you can adjust because it's just a step too far. On the seat post, leg length is going to make a huge difference. People are adjustable enough to take the handlebars, but not seat posts. But you're right. And then a lot of things that people say are an improvement sometimes aren't. Threaded bottom brackets is a prime example. And then oval chain rings. When Chris Froome was winning, everyone was into oval chain rings. Now it's Pogacar, round chain rings, 160, 165 mil cranks are all the rage. And I think when the next person who starts winning, when Pogacar starts losing, that'll be the next big thing. So,
yeah, I've got to say the breaking down of his position on the bike is just so nauseating at this point. It's like every second or third cycling reel on Instagram is some side-on shot of his position, like trying to unlock the secrets to riding at 350 watts in zone 2 all day. It's just getting a little bit out of control. I don't have any outlandish statements, Jesse. Frame. I reckon Hambini and I can get into it a bit more on the tyres and the wheels. We may cross swords a bit there, but
well, we've already started talking about the Tour magazine stuff, so I think I'm more interested to get. I'm not really sure necessarily what question to ask you. I just want to talk about it more because we obviously reference Tour magazine testing or whatever aero testing comes out on the bike, and I do that because, again, if a new bike is released and you want to ride fast, it's a factor, and that's all we have to discuss around, is the bike any good? And so I understand people like, oh, you're nitpicking, details. What if, it doesn't carry over to a size 48? Right? But then it's like, okay, so do we just not discuss it? Should we all just ride giant TCRs? Like, is there a better way I could be looking at, like, breaking down the new bikes? I'm happy to adjust my angle. I'm just not sure what better we have.
Part of the stuff I've done in the past is the way you go and test people in wind tunnels versus CFD. You can do a couple of methods around this because testing in a wind tunnel is time consuming and it's prone to error. There are a few calculators out there which are empirically derived. So you can put in the tube shapes, the geometry of the tube shapes, and it'll give you a number of what the drag is. Now, the number obviously has a bit of error in it because the tube shapes are not accurate, and where the joints in the tube shape, so around the head tube, around the bottom bracket area, is not so accurate. That is a way of testing it. But fundamentally, unless you go and ride in controlled conditions, I'd probably say a velodrome is better than going outside. You're not going to know. So the best way would be for you personally, in the individual, to go and find a velodrome and ride around it with a power meter and the speed and see what you get, because that's a way of testing. If you go and put the bike with the half model of the guy chopped off, I think there's just too many permutations to calculate, and that's why I don't test frames. I only test wheels, because the wheels are the same 700C wheels on any bike size, so you can just test them from testing. But that is also there's a bit of error in there as well, because certain wheels work better on certain frames.
Okay, that's interesting. So to kind of follow that with a different example, like, so the new Trek Madone came out, and as soon as Chris rode it and at a PR thing, I saw it. I was instantly, this thing's not as fast as the old one. It's just impossible. They test it with their aero bottles. They say it's the same speed. Tour magazine test it, and I think it's like 8 or 9 watts slower. Is it, based on what your experience is it not fair to say that the new Madone is slower than the old one? Because there's too many variables, and it depends on the frame size, and it depends who's riding it is. Or am I okay to say the new Madone's a dog because they couldn't get it faster than the old one?
I think those water bottles make a big difference because they reduce the area.
Yeah.
So that's where the difference comes from. So I think in the tour test, they took them off.
Yes. Yep.
So that has a huge penalty, because the fastest way to make something is to make a hard boundary where air cannot cross. If you have the water bottles, air cannot cross. So it makes it fast. Deeper wheels are faster, not necessarily because of the deep shape, but that sort of void in the middle where you've just got the spokes, which act like a big mixer, gets smaller with deeper wheels. If you've got like very shallow wheels, that mixer area gets massive. So those water bottles are giving you that aerodynamic advantage. And you see that, a lot of modern bikes, the BMC also has that triangle blocked off as much as it can for that reason.
I'm just trying to. I'm trying to get you to call me out and either say you're good, keep doing what you're doing, or should I change what I'm saying? Essentially,
I think you should stay as you are, because you need the controversy and the outlandish statements, because it gives you more hits.
But I'm not saying it because I'm saying it because I'm saying it because I think it's true. If I'm just dead wrong, I'll stop saying it.
I think it's true as well. I think the old
Okay.
Madone is faster.
Okay, there we go.
I think it's true as well because the tube shapes are longer and it, yeah, if you start from the basics, I think the old Madone is faster. If you whack on the bottles as well on the old Madone, I think you'll be faster still. So that's where I am. I think it's just marketing. I mean, the other thing with that Madone is, new one, when they brought it out, they reduced the number of sizes and sort of marketed it as being better and easier to spec the bike. Well, it's bullshit, isn't it? They just wanted to reduce their inventory.
When we had Robert Cuden on from Tour Magazine, he's runs a testing, and he said, we asked him, like, what kind of difference in your results do you think is significant between bikes? What would you be able to feel? And he said about 10 watts. You'd be able to probably feel it. That would be something you could be able to feel. Do you think it's fair? You know, let's say, I think the Tavelo S5's 203 watts and the SL8's 208. So it's a 5-watt difference. Given all the variables that you might run into, is it not really fair to say that the Tavelo S5 is faster than the SL8? Is that just a generalization that's not, like, what's the right word, professionally accurate to say?
Yeah, I think it's a bit dicey. If you ask me as just a guy on the street, I would go with you and say, yeah, it's faster. If you asked, like, with me with my engineering hat on, I wouldn't be comfortable saying that because the margin is too small. From experience, if you're riding in like Northern Europe where the wind is swirling around and buffeting, a wind tunnel is not really the ultimate test. It's not a good indicator.
This stuff is going, or has become, the primary, and will become even more and more the primary factor for people buying bikes. Weight will become less of a thing to people to talk about, and more less of a decision maker when it comes to buying a bike. And so, if we're talking about aerodynamics, and you're essentially saying, well, the only real way to test it, lads, is to hire a velodrome and test each bike, like, with some sort of testing protocol, I'm like, out. No, not happening. And what we thought, or what we hope, is the best testing protocol out there at the moment, you know, there are issues that you're highlighting. So I don't know, is there a future for some sort of standardized testing when it comes to this aerodynamics, or will it be just as simple as Jesse being able to spot this stuff? Because ultimately, he kind of has. Like, he's pretty much nailing this stuff.
To see something that's less draggy, I agree with him totally. You want shapes that are deep, not very thick, and you want as few gaps as possible. So that you only have to look at other places, like, you know, F1 as an example. All the joints between the parts, they tape, because if there's a gap, it increases the drag. So if you are taking the example of a bike, the Colnago and the Tavelo S5, they tend to have tubes that wrap around the wheels and the tyres to try and mitigate that. Now, I've met some of the engineers. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the bike engineers, I use the term loosely, bike engineers, hate me because they know full well that they're trying to market something to a load of people that aren't technically minded. And they use that to their maximum advantage. So they call CFD the virtual wind tunnel, this, that, and the other. I mean, some of these guys, they're sort of like 21, 22, straight out of university. I would say they don't really have much of an idea. They haven't really lived around. And it's scary. It is scary. And going back to your point about, is there going to be a test standard? I don't think there will be. Because it's not like you buy a car where you've got fuel consumption figures and all this, and the government has an interest in it. I don't think there'll be a test stand for Aero. I think the safety standards will come in, and that's mainly being driven by e-bikes. So that, I think, is coming, because the e-bikes, you can easily get up to 30, 40 miles an hour on some e-bikes. Obviously, that's illegal. They're only allowed 15 in most of Europe. but that I think will come, and I think there'll be, and I think that's where the market's going, because we're on this YouTube channel, and we are really a very small part of the cycling public. The bulk of the bikes in Holland, let's say, are used as commuter vehicles to get from A to B. There's very few that are racing bikes, and they're not going to care one iota about aero. They just want to get from A to B. That's all. But your point about weight, I completely disagree with. I think that if they're going towards lighter weight materials, is bound to happen, because lighter weight you can instantly feel. Just the way the bike handles is completely different when you go from one bike to another. I mean, it's very, very noticeable. So I totally disagree with that. I think to a large extent the aero bubble, unless you're right, absolutely at the creme de la creme of racing, is diminishing, because people realize they're only doing 30 k's per hour on average. You look on Strava, club rides, most of them are riding around 27, 28 k's, and that's a fast club ride. And then, I mean, I was at that speed before I started training. So, last year my FTP was just over 200, 201 or 202. It's now, when I last tested it, was 320. So I've gained 125 in that year. And that's a huge difference. Now, my old bike, I've still got them. It feels completely different now. The power has increased. Now I can feel the difference. Before I couldn't.
What changes? How do you feel like the bike characteristics have changed? What are you noticing that you maybe didn't, or what's less important now you're fitter?
Flex. I can feel the flex in the frame, because
what frame are we talking about here?
Quite a few of them, all of them.
Oh, okay.
I used to think it was a myth, because people were buying my bottom brackets and saying, it feels stiffer than the previous one, blah, blah, blah. I thought, okay, I'd be amazed if anyone can feel that. And then now I can feel it, because 320 might be the FTP, but the peak power, when you absolutely nail it, might be 700, 800, whatever it is. I don't actually measure it, but you can feel it flex then. And it's quite rewarding in some respects. You feel the difference in your own product, but and that just sort of like completely poo-poos any aerodynamic gain, isn't it? 2 watts versus 120. It's just.
See, I totally disagree with that. I think I get, you could argue, so the aerodynamic improvements make more of a difference now because you're going faster, obviously. And there's nothing you'd have to be riding an e-bike to keep up with yourself from, your year ago self to become everything now. But I don't think, I really don't like that, because I hear that quite a lot. It's like, oh, just go and train a bit more, or it doesn't matter. You could just wear a skin suit. It's like, why does one have to cancel out the other? Why can't we just discuss them all equally? Like, a 5-watt frame saving is still a 5-watt frame saving, just because you can't ride it 45k an hour for an hour. Like, it doesn't discount the discussion, especially if you're paying 20 grand for an S-Works.
Let me throw this one in at you, and it's probably one you haven't thought about. So my FTP went up from 200, let's call it 200 to 320, but my drag also increased, because physically my muscles, legs, everything got bigger, and that was actually measurable in a wind tunnel. So my system drag got worse because I'd gotten physically stronger, muscles got bigger, but that was far more counteracted by the muscle gain. So that aerobic performance was improved, and people don't really think about that. Obviously it was quite dramatic for me, because it's like almost 50% increase. So
but this would be like me talking to someone from F1 and being like, oh, who cares if your F1 car's fast? Like, I only need to drive to the supermarket. Aerodynamics for your F1 car doesn't matter. And you're like, well, like, what? Just because you don't need to drive at 400 300 kilometers an hour doesn't. It's just a separate discussion. I find that's a weird way to like come into an aerodynamic discussion and be like, well, it doesn't matter for me because I gained 100 watts. It's like, what? But aren't we chatting about how fast the bike is?
Do you care about how fast the bike is or whether you win? What's your most primary point? Is it to win or is it how fast your bike is?
Both.
Okay. But if you ask me personally, I would want to win more than I care what bike I ride. So that's the difference. So my advice, if I was going to do it and I was a coach, would be to go and get, sorry, not a coach, just a rider wanting to win, is go and get a coach. So in my case, the hairdresser sorted me out. So I don't know if we want to touch on this, but she signed me up to a test. So there was a cohort of 20 people who signed up to a university. She's a doctor. 10 of those people went on a structured training program that like an exercise sort of person did, a coach. The other 10 were managed by doctors. So in my case, she managed me. So she got my FTP from 200 to 320. And then the actual measures she uses for performance is they tend to use how fast you can run the 10K. So the 10K time, so I can do it in 38 minutes. So the target is 35 to get me down to 35. That's the genetic limit, she says. So that's what I would say, go after. I wouldn't even concentrate on the bike. I know it probably is going to turn your viewers off, but it's the truth.
I just couldn't disagree more. I really could. I mean, I don't.
Well, just put the numbers in. 120 watts versus 510. It's
but if you're talking about like Trek release a new bike, it's an interesting discussion to say, oh, it's 8 watts slower than the last one. To come in and say, oh, it doesn't matter that it's 8 watts slower because you could just train and get 20 watts faster. Like, what? Do people actually do that? I find that really strange. Like, why can't we talk about improvements in the aerodynamics of the bikes, as marginal as it may be? And if maybe that doesn't matter for you, maybe you ride at 25 kilometers an hour. But it doesn't mean it doesn't.
I think the majority of the cycling viewership who are looking after the elitist bikes, so the Pinarellos and the Treks of this world, don't realise that evolution of that bike is 3/10 of fuck all, for want of a better word. There isn't going to be a huge difference between bike on bike. That 3 watts, is it real? I mean, 3 watts is just such a small number when you go and measure it. The instrumentation, or just even the atmospheric conditions when you measure it on that day, could give you that 3 watts.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Tour test, I don't know. I haven't seen their test procedure, so I don't know what corrections they make for humidity. I'd imagine they use barometric pressure and correct for that. But these are all corrections, so there's errors in them. There's errors in the instrumentation. Unless there's a step change, you're not really going to see the difference. And when I say step change, if you go and say take a bike with deep tube shapes and thin sections, between the bikes, I wouldn't expect to see a huge difference. So the Cannondale System 6 is widely regarded amongst aero engineers as the fastest bike.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one that, and you look at it, it's got deep tube shapes, small gaps. It's there. The Trek Madone, I think if you put Pogacar on either of those bikes, he'd win. But that's a separate issue.
Yeah, but I think so. That's what I'm getting. So that all I'm saying is that's a good point, right? You compare the Trek Madone to the Cannondale System 6. Now, maybe you just ride at 25 kilometers an hour and it's not really relevant to you. That's totally fine. I don't ride at 25 kilometers an hour. I ride faster and I'm not even a pro. What if you're a pro and you're sitting on the front of a peloton trying to bring the breakaway back for 2 hours at 370 watts? I think you probably would notice a difference between a System 6 and the Trek Madone. Would you not?
Probably would, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's still a relevant discussion. It's weird to have that discussion and then some guy walks over with a 200 watt FTP and says, oh, guys, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. Like, what?
They're all the same at 30 k's. You're not going to notice a difference.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That's the crux of it.
My point on the weight thing is you can't notice the difference of the weight. I mean, okay, you can argue there is a feel difference, a vibe difference to a bike's, 600-700 gram weight difference between a TCR and an S5. Yes, but boil it down to a performance difference at 25 kilometers an hour, there is no difference. And then climbing, there is no difference. So why not have the options? Why not have, that's why I was saying weight becomes less of an issue, because people realize that just because a bike is light doesn't make it faster, even on climbs.
But I disagree with that. On a climb, I can feel the difference in the weight between a heavy bike, a kilo, let's say, between two of my bikes, there's a kilo difference. I can feel the difference when I go straight uphill, easily. Feel the drag, not the drag, but it's more difficult to lug the other bike up. The other thing is the handling. So if you're driving around dodging traffic, the lighter bike is way more nimble than a heavy bike.
But we did the
Completely
number.
disagree. I completely disagree.
It's just a law of physics. How can you disagree with that?
But at a point, I mean, obviously 2 kilos, yes. I mean, we were doing some tests here on some of the sort of 30, 40-minute climbs, and I was finding that I was on the difference between the S5 and the TCR, so full aero bike and a climbing bike, which is 600, 700 gram difference. We were looking at like 4 watts over the time.
When on that when we did that climb, that sort of, what was it, 20-minute, 30-minute climb, I think it was 9% average. I put both situations in. If your bike was a kilo lighter, it saved 4 watts. So that's saving 4 watts. If the bike's a kilo lighter, 4 watts is 4 watts. When you're doing, and that was when you were doing. That was in the simulation where you were doing 360 watts or something. Like, yeah, that's if it's 2 kilos lighter. That's 8 watts.
But that's the problem with a 6.8 kilo weight limit. Your bike's not going to be 2 kilos lighter. Your climbing bike, it's just not.
My point is, for the average punter who, let's say, is 200 watts is their power output, 4 watts is a big proportion of that 200 watts versus someone who's got 500 watts power output. 4 watts is actually quite small. So they're more likely to feel it when they go uphill. So me, back in a year ago, I could feel the difference. It was much more noticeable than it is now. Now it just feels like a little bit of a difference, but I'm just still going up the hill. Bear in mind, the hills in northern England, northern Europe aren't really, Mont Ventoux. They're pretty minuscule in comparison. So, yeah, but I mean, I can feel the difference. So I'd be surprised if you can't.
I think you can feel the difference, Chris.
Yes, this is the thing. I can feel the difference, the vibe difference, the get out of the saddle. Oh, wow, look at that. 15 seconds later, I'm still doing the same power and going at the same speed. So putting aside all the snappy crap that you hear, you've still got to climb for 30 minutes and you've still got to put the power out, and that feeling goes away and you settle into your rhythm and you're doing your thing. And so that's always my pushback, is like, oh, wow, have a look how it feels. That dies off.
That is not really what I was alluding to. If you look at the way that you guys ride, you've got long roads, probably not that much traffic, and then you can go up. Whereas I'm going around the streets of Berlin and Hamburg using that bike for commuting as well as out at the weekend. So I'm having to go around corners, dodge people in their fucking pushchairs in the middle of the cycle path and all this, that. And then you do notice the difference, because the turn of direction, when you want to just go literally round somebody, is a lot more snappy. This business about holding speed well, I'm not really, don't care about that at all.
No.
It's just...
To be clear, like when we've discussed this in the past, and there's lots of times I've said this, I've said heaps of times that kind of do it all slightly aero tweaked, basically climbing bike is. I've said lots of times in lots of situations that that's a better pick. Like there's a lot of. I'm pretty sure he made jokes about like, the guy on the club ride running a System 6, and you're just like, what are you? That's just not. That's not going to feel very good. It's not going to accelerate very well. You'll notice the weight difference, and you're not riding at a speed where the aero drag savings are significant. So but it's almost a separate conversation. Whether it makes a difference for you is that's for the individual to decide. But whether a new bike, how two of the new bikes at your local shop compare to each other is still an interesting discussion. Whether you ever notice it or not.
I doubt you notice. Well, there you go. It's...
Who, me, or who are you talking to? Who are you? That's what I mean. I doubt you'd notice. Who's you?
You, as in
me?
You, Jesse. Yeah, I don't think you would notice.
Okay, what about me when I had a 400 watt FTP 2 years ago? I think I'd probably notice a 5 watt difference.
I don't think you would, because at 400 watts, 5 watts is a very small number. Whereas if you got the actual, people with the power of a prawn who've got 200 watts, 5 watts is a bigger number, isn't it? It's a lot bigger.
Yeah, but that person can't ride at 50 kilometers an hour in a crit. So it's...
And then a crit's another one. Unless you're at the front of the crit, all your aero gains...
I'm quite often off the front. I'm not being arrogant. It's just, that's the situations that I'm thinking of when I'm talking about a bike. Is I'm off the front of an elite crit at 50 kilometers an hour, tucked in.
And I think you would benefit from hiring out that velodrome and going in there and then finding the best bike. But you see, you're at the very top end. The bulk of the people aren't, and they're not going to spend that much money or bother with that much ball ache.
No. So what's the best they can... Yeah. So what's the best you can do if not doing that is just, pick the faster bike.
Probably looking at it would give you a fairly good indication of how fast the bike is, which is what you did.
Good. Yeah, pretty much.
Well, yeah. You can usually see a lot of the drag from looking at it. People who have a bit of experience in what they're looking for know what to look for. So deeper wheels, instantly people look at that and think that's low drag. And in your mind, you think it's because of the shape, but a lot of it is because the middle is smaller.
All right, let's pause real quick there with Hambini just to have a quick chat about today's show partner, Silka. And it is a new product alert, Jesse Coyle.
Yes, Silka have updated their ultimate tubeless sealant. So it's got the same sealing capacity as the previous sealant, which was really highly rated. Sealing punctures up to 6 millimeters. But the new version lasts at least 6 months in the tyres, which is amazing. You have to top it up less frequently. And you can inject it through the valve, so you don't have to put it in the tyre and then put the tyre in. You can just inject it straight through the valve. So they've taken what was already really successful in their ultimate tubeless sealant previously and just made it better across the board.
I have been using this for the last 6 months without a problem. I did talk about a self-sealing flat last week using this sealant, which is obviously one of the benefits of it. But they do this other cool thing with some of their pro riders, Jesse, that you did pick up on last week. It's the bad day payback or whatever it was.
The bad day payout, yeah. So for their pro athletes that they sponsor in the Lifetime Grand Prix, if they get a flat that can't fix with the plug, or they have to put a tube in, or have to swap a wheel, the pro rider gets $500 for their trouble. So they're putting their money where their mouth is on the sealing properties of the new sealant.
That's pretty cool. So go ahead and pick this up if you want. We've talked about the distribution of this, all coming from local warehouses. Use code NEROSHOW at checkout for 15% off. And a big thanks to Silka for supporting today's episode. Can you try and make me care about the engineering of a bike? Because I couldn't give a shit. Like, I really couldn't.
What if you had a dog?
Well,
that's the thing.
If it's fast, I couldn't care less. Like, I remember I had the Bianchi, the XR4, nicest bikes I've ridden and relatively fast, I thought at the time. And I remember it died, sadly, had a crash, and cut it open, looked at it, and it was like, this was not where the crash had happened, but like the carbon was dirty as hell in there. Like it was, I would imagine that if it had been cut open by a YouTuber, it would have probably been ripped to shreds. And yet there I was singing the praises of how wonderful this bike was. What am I missing out here in caring about?
There's two aspects to this, I think. I think the first is if you have a creak or some sort of mechanical fault, inadvertently in your mind, I think it makes you ride slower because you're listening to this noise that's going creak, creak, creak. You think, bollocks, why did I buy this? And you want to get it fixed. That's one aspect. The other, and it's become a lot more prevalent, is, and I've seen a few of these, is insurance claims. So now, certainly in the UK, people are suing or taking, there's a process called a small claims court where you can take a bike manufacturer to court for either providing products that are not fit for purpose or providing products that do not fit the spec that they were sold with. There's a few things that have changed of late, and that is mainly the COVID boom is over. So the engineering involved, I mean, they were just chucking bikes out, which frankly were poorly built. Some of those are failing, and then the manufacturers being held responsible for it. So would you care if that happened? I would probably say yes, because you might end up in hospital. The health service in the UK is semi-free, it's funded by the taxpayer, but it's free at the point of use. So would you care about that? Yes. And then the financial implications of, you've bought your brand new 10 grand bike and it snaps in half. That's quite a big impact or pill to swallow. So that's it. Should you care? For 90% of the people, they're probably not going to notice the difference. The people that would notice the difference are the people who build the bike. So the bike shop, if they have to build it. And if you are a lot more of a DIYer, so I remember probably 25 years ago, people were buying ready-built computers from Dell and then taking them home. Now
Picking
it
them
tends
up,
to be
yeah.
you buy it in component form and put it together. And then you can see the same thing happening in bikes because people are buying Shimano group sets, handlebars from, not so much handlebars, but a seat from XYZ, wheels from another company, and then building the bike to what they want. That's becoming a lot more prevalent. So when you go and build it, you'll notice the difference. So should you care? It depends on your individual circumstances. There's plenty of people like yourself who will buy a Tavelo and be quite happy with it. But if you go to the nitty gritty of it, you can probably eke out that 2 watts extra from optimizing the bearings and stuff like that.
So your 203 watt Cervelo is actually 201 because you put your low friction seal bearings in. Good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we compound the gains here, Hambini. We don't pick and choose. Could Specialized make a new Venge that's faster than the SL8 in real world conditions?
Yes, they could. They could do it. There's a few factors that have changed since the last Venge. I think the last Venge was rim brake. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was the last Venge was they had a disc. They had one iteration after that Venge Vice with those really clunky brakes on it.
That's one area where drag has increased. So the introduction of disc brakes, because discs have to be cooled. They're not, they warp. So those cuts and slits inside Shimano brake rotors are designed to increase the turbulence, and that improves the conduction of heat away. But you get a drag penalty from it. So that's one thing they could look at. So they could enclose that and then make that faster. So there's room for improvement there. And then the UCI rules around the fork length, so how deep the forks are, they've all been relaxed to make the bike ultimate aerodynamics more achievable, so you can make it more aerodynamic. So I think yes, I think without doubt.
Okay.
Now, if you ask, if you had to a rim brake and then develop the rim brake to that level, I would probably say the rim brake would be faster because of that disc is quite a significant penalty. that
Mm-hmm.
technically a rim brake doesn't have. I mean, appreciate the rim brake isn't going to stop you as quickly, but the actual standard of the rim brake, some of the bikes have it hidden behind the fork. I think it was a Giant, is it Propel, one of the time
Yep.
trial bikes.
Yeah, and the Trek had them tucked in to the fork. Yeah.
My BMC Time Machine that I use for time trials also has the brakes buried inside the fork. And you can see that when you take it on a wind tunnel, you can see that there's some thought that's gone into that.
Okay, I'm really sorry because people are probably going to get annoyed that I keep asking, but I just have to press again. So Specialized can make you think Specialized can make a bike faster than the SL8 in the new Venge?
Yeah.
I just don't understand. But do you think it's pointless to do because it's so marginally tiny bit faster that hardly anyone's going to notice the difference and it would just be a waste of time anyway?
I think they do it for commercial reasons, not for engineering reasons. Yeah, all these companies, they're in it for their money. The public perception of them will be that they do it for engineering. It's bollocks. They're interested in their shareholders. So I think they would do it because it would be a commercial success. If someone else did it, I'm trying to think of some brand, I don't know, D-list brand did it,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be so much of a commercial success. Specialized it's almost like Pinarello. It's like the top of the top in terms of the brand, like Ferrari and Bugatti and all that lot.
So it would be technically faster, but you don't think... I just don't understand that. I don't understand. It would be technically faster, but no one rides fast enough to notice it, or because I don't really understand
If you were like you, Jesse, with your 400 watt FTP, and they brought out a new Venge with the very deep frame shapes, very deep forks, you would notice it.
Okay.
Would you buy it? Well, that's up to you if you want to spend your 15 grand on it.
I probably wouldn't buy it, by the way. I would talk about it on the show and I'd get excited about it. Would I spend... In Australia, that's not going to be 15. That'll probably... If they did a new Venge, it'd probably be 22 in a Dura-Ace build, 23. Yeah. And no, really I'm not spending that much money on it.
You're not going to buy it. You'd buy your Trek Madone. But,
God, no.
It'd be a commercial success. They would sell it.
Okay.
If you asked the club rider who's riding at 25 k's per hour where they would feel the difference, it'd be right on the nuts of whether they'd be able to feel it.
No, personally, I'd probably just buy the new Elves. It looks pretty quick. And I probably wouldn't worry if it's a couple of watts slower than the new Venge. But I don't...
Get an e-bike.
Yeah, okay.
Or a scooter.
Yeah. Okay, all right. All right, we got there. I'm all right. I understand.
Can I ask then just about some underrated bike brands or frames? Because I know we've mentioned all the big boys here, but in your experience over the last period of time, are there any that have stood out?
Cannondale were once crap. Now I don't think they are. They're a lot better. Part of that is I think their company structure has changed, and I think since I think we're taken over by PON, someone like that, or Axel.
Yep.
I forgot.
Yeah, they're in the PON group. Yep.
That's changed. So whatever factory, whatever they're doing, that's changed quite a bit. And then you've got the rise, and it is a relentless rise of the Chinese manufacturers. Now there's the bit which is very prevalent on YouTube, which you see, which is Windspace, Yoleo, and all these other ones. There's also a lot of frames that are sold sometimes direct to market, like light carbon, but a lot of the light carbon frames are actually bought by sort of mass retailers in European countries, and then the paint job is changed. So in Germany, there's a brand of bike shop called Fahrrad XXL. They've got, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 around Germany. In there's a brand called Carver. And that is just a rebranded Chinese frame. And they are very popular because they're not that expensive. And you can just go into the shop, try, 20 different sizes of bikes because they have them all. It's a massive place. And then ride one away. They are, I think, increasing market share, certainly within Europe where I know, by stealth. Because it's not very visible marketing-wise because you can't see them. But then if you go into the shop and then speak to the guy, he'll explain exactly where that frame came from, and then you can go away and then you know, research it yourself. I think that's on the rise, and I think people's habits have changed. So previously, I would never consider buying a bike unless I went and saw it. Now, mail order or internet order is quite commonplace. Elves is another one. You've got and Tavelo. You got a few brands that weren't perhaps so widely known there. And you've got Windspace. I think out of those brands is a few years ahead of everybody else because they started first. Windspace and Yoleo. I think they're a few steps ahead. But it's interesting that Windspace and Yoleo have now gone direct to EPS molding. So I know you guys aren't interested in the engineering, but the EPS mold has less chance of a void. So the frame is stiffer, stronger, and it's easier to work on. It's more accurate. It costs them more to make, but I think that will become the standard on this sort of like higher tier Chinese kind of frame. So yeah, would you notice the difference with that? Yes, I think you would. If you if you're a heavy rider or had a decent power output, you can feel the difference between that one and a non. Obviously, the layup's different, but yeah. I mean, one company sent me two frames. One was EPS molded and one was bladder molded. And you can, when you build it, you can tell the difference. When you ride it, you can feel the difference.
Interesting. So when you say feel the difference, you mean like just in terms of what? Can you describe that at all?
In engineering we call it NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness. So
Okay.
the engineering purists like myself don't want a frame to flex. So people talk about compliance and things like that. If you have a frame that flexes, you're losing power somewhere, and you want to have that sort of compliance isolated somewhere. So usually in the suspension or the tire or somewhere, that does all of it, and then the frame does nothing. When you're riding a bladder molded frame at a higher power output, back to back, I mean, if you did it in isolation, you'd never notice. You can feel the difference that the EPS molded frame is a harsher ride. People might not prefer that because they'd say it's harsh, but from a purely stiffness perspective, it's quite measurable. But I mean, what are your guys' takes on what do you think? What do you think is going to happen in terms of the Chinese brands and all this kind of thing? Because that's the in thing at the moment.
Well, you're the ambassador, Jesse. You're the one writing it.
Yeah, I gotta.
No, see, Jesse's all frustrated. Jesse's all frustrated with them at the moment because I understand it. It's at this weird point where we're all talking about it. There's chat. We want to see data. We do want to see testing. I'm sorry to bring it back to testing. I mean, I even noticed Astana are winning races on the X Lab now, so we're ticking that box. But yeah, I think we're just stuck in this like bit of vicious circle at the moment until we see it actually compared to SL8s in like-minded tests. I think we're just talking out our ass until then.
For the more expensive, like the $1,500 USD plus frames.
Yeah.
If they're not, well, okay, they have more marketing because they're an actual brand. But yeah, my opinion on the show last week was that they should be doing some testing to show how their frames compare to others on the market. I think otherwise it's just influencers riding around on them, and that's how you know the frame's good, and that's not really a good way to operate, I don't think. But I really think brands need to be selling them complete bikes, or at least having if it's not complete and all the parts are picked, at least having some like a factor style, like pick your cranks, pick your handlebar width. That would be good, something like that. I think while they still just only sell frames, I just will just be kind of noodling along, I think.
I disagree. I think the way that they're going to go about it will be fundamentally different. So if we take the SLA, the Aero test that Specialized have probably done themselves, I've never seen any published data that they show exactly how they do it, but yet you believe it. Yeah. So
Well, I mean, we talked about we talked about that last week. We didn't believe it, but I suppose Tour Magazine did their hard work for them. Was ultimately where we landed on it.
Oh yeah. No. So yeah, I mean, obviously, if you don't care about the testing and you don't ride that fast, it doesn't matter. But if these brands are wanting to appeal to more road cyclists, there are more road cyclists that are looking at Tour Magazine's results or some kind of results. And I think not having it, I think some testing is important. Otherwise,
and I think that's the way the market has been manipulated, because if you are, Jesse doing 400 watts, that Tour Magazine test is a number, but the reality is the Tour Magazine should really give you 203 watts, but a range. So 200 watts to 212 watts would be the expected range. They might have just taken the middle of it. When you have another bike, they should give you a range, and you should see how much that overlap is, and they don't give you that. And I think that's the bit that people miss, because this is it, because you don't have anything better to compare to. So you use the Tour test, but in reality, the actual physical reality, you might end up being slower than your System 6 or your Trek Madone. And that's the way it is. It's the marketing of it.
but like a light carbon LCR 07, if it was tested, it might be 235. How the hell does anyone know? It could be an absolute dog, and we're all convinced it's about as close to it's close to a TCR or something. Because the only Chinese bike I know that has wind tunnel testing is the Seeker Spear.
I think the Windspace do as well. But anyway, parking that aside, the testing I would take with a pinch of salt. I honestly would take with a pinch of salt, because there's too much variation in the frame and the rider on top of it. If it's something very specific, like you are testing pedals as an example, Aero pedals, I would take that, because it's very much within the boundary and everyone's got a pedal. Wheels is another one I would take, because they're the same size on everyone's bike. But the frame varies with the riders so significantly and their position that I would, unless you could copy the Tour position exactly, I wouldn't worry about 2 watts.
Oh, it doesn't need to be. Well, I'm not even saying it's 2 watts. It could be 50 watts.
Yeah,
no one's tested them. I mean, and it doesn't need to be wind tunnel tested. Maybe, maybe one of the, I didn't know Windspace would be tested, but maybe they get, I don't know, I'm making this up. Maybe they get together and they do a velodrome-based test with one rider, and they test all the bikes, and I don't know, do something. Don't just stick 10 influencers on it and tell us it's awesome.
And I don't, and that's the thing. You see, people buy the bikes marketed on Aero, whereas it's not generally relevant for most of them. And even on this show, we're having an argument over Aero because you have the 400 watts, but most of the people watching it won't.
Okay, what are the? You're buying a new bike, Hambini. What are the? Give me the 4. These are the criteria. This is what you're looking at. Okay, obviously budget is key here, but let's assume. Nah, fuck it. Whatever. You can buy whatever the hell you want. All right. Give me the factors. Give me the criteria that you're looking at.
The size. So get one that fits you, because I've seen plenty of people on bikes that look flashy, but it doesn't fit them particularly well. That's one. And then you're on about the performance features now, aren't you, I guess? So I would get 50 or 60 mil wheels is another one, because I think that's a good all-rounder wheel for most conditions. And then if we talk about who makes the bike, the manufacturer, and this is the juicy bit. If you're looking at Western manufacturers, I would probably say time or look or Specialized. He's not bad. I would get those ones. Interestingly, the two first ones, the time and the look, they are basically owning their own factories, so they have a lot better QA than they're the criteria I would look at. And then in terms of the cycling individual, clothing make you go faster, and then the group set. As much as I completely panned Shimano in one video to the point where I've probably partly had an influence in a 3 million cranks they recalled, but I would actually get Shimano group set over SRAM and over the Chinese wheel top group set. I've been trialing that. Initially when I got it, I thought this is crap, but they've done some software updates and it's a lot more usable now than it was. So money no object, Dura-Ace, look frame or time frame, 50-60 mil wheels. And in those wheels, if you want the absolute aero, I'd get the Windspace Mega. If you just want a general wheel that will go around, I would get 9 Velo. I wouldn't buy any Western wheel at all.
So in the frame, then are you looking at the frame weight? Are we looking at a style of frame? I mean, are you looking at an Aero tweaked frame, a do-it-all frame, a lightweight frame, drop seat stays?
I mean, I don't ride fast enough to be able to get a huge aero advantage, so I'm looking at just a general frame to do it all. And then you have to look at your personal circumstances. So I take the bikes on planes quite frequently. So I don't know if you're aware, but they're starting to get tight on certain things you can and can't take on planes. So Di2 batteries, now you have to remove them from the bike and then put them in your hand luggage.
Selling point for SRAM right there.
Yeah. So that's one aspect. The other is brakes. So disc brakes with hydraulic fluid in them. Some airports that you go from are asking you to drain the fluid out before you put it on the aircraft.
What?
So yeah, because it's corrosive. So if you ever put brake fluid on the side of your car, it eats paint. Absolutely eats paint. It's a very good paint stripper. So they're asking. My local airport asks me to drain. I did it once, and then I got stuff this. I'll bring my rim brake bike. They asked me to drain the brake fluid out of the brakes. So,
Jesus.
and I think that's coming because legislation is only going to go one way, which is tighter.
It's. I mean, that's why we're talking, because that's not how I would obviously approach buying a bike. But that's and
I definitely wouldn't buy the look. It's a dog. It's a dog. It's slow as.
It comes back to that engineering thing. Like, you're prioritizing. You mentioned time and look, and I'm assuming you're prioritizing them because they own their factories. I think their factories, well, Time's in their own factory in France. So that's a factor for you, clearly. Couldn't give a shit myself.
And then the personal circumstances. If you want to ride a bike and then you have to travel places, draining the brake fluid is such a fucking ball ache. It's going to influence your choice.
Yeah.
You as well just stick with a rim brake bike.
What airport's that? Because I'm never going there.
KLM is.
Oh, wow.
So Jasper, KLM's air handlers, depending on which airport it is. I've had it happen at 2 airports. One is Copenhagen, so Kastrup Airport, and my local airport's Humberside Airport, so I fly from there frequently. And then
Jesus.
KLM asks you to drain it. It actually says when you go to check in, there's a big placard, and it says, if you have any of these substances on you, make it known. And then they're I mean, if you take a bike box along, the handler asks now, does it have?
How do they check? What's he doing? Like, cutting your hose cables? See if there's fluid in there?
I think at the moment it's just on goodwill.
Yeah, right.
So they can't check it. So if you tell them there's no brake fluid in it, then they'll probably take that as it is. If they do check it, so if they, open the bleed screw and pull the handlebars and fluid comes out, they'll probably throw you off the plane. So because it is a criminal offence in the UK, so you can be there is jail
Yeah.
sentence there available, but you're more likely to be fined. So, because it eats aluminium. So if it leaks out onto the aircraft structure, it'll just eat it.
Keen, what you think about tires? So if someone asked me, just they don't really give you much context. It's just, hey Jesse, getting a new bike. What tire width should I put on? I pretty much always just say 30s. What would you say to that person?
I'd probably say what width are your wheels, and then fit the tire according to the wheel width. Me personally, I run 28 on the back, and then sometimes, depending on the front, 25. And on my rim brake bike, I've got 23s because it's a rim brake bike, and it's now the reasons for that. I like the higher tire pressure because the higher tire pressure, especially when you're commuting and then go around corners, I like that feel more. So on my motorbike, because I've got a Fireblade as well, I like the higher tire pressure on that as well. So it makes me feel
It's like similar. You have kind of a similar subjective feel of a bike that Patrick Leno has, who's another YouTube bike reviewer. He kind of likes stiffer is better, less comfortable is better.
Less comfortable is faster. That's what I like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the vibration.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen you, I think you've commented a few times when we've made comments about tyre width based around us suggesting wide tyres and basically you saying, well, they're slower, guys. What are you talking about?
So this isn't. Yeah. No. Can I follow on for that, Chris? Because you've got.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Right. This is interesting. So I'm pretty sure I remember a comment you were kind of saying. Oh, it's interesting that like the industry is trying to convince you that wider tires are more aero, or something along those lines. Like a 25 is faster, but that's a weird hair to split. Given that like a 28 or a 30 is just way more comfortable, to split the watt savings on a tire width but not between frames, even though the wider tires are more comfortable, isn't that a bit of a weird I think they're at odds with each other in terms of mentality approach to analyzing a product.
I mean, there's no real argument over which tire is more aerodynamic, because if you get the narrower tire, it will be faster. The argument is over, is that saving more than having a wider tire that's more comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes down to personal preference. Now, I think there's a sort of happy medium there, and I would probably say 25 to 28 on the front is enough for most people because they're not got massive amounts of weight on the front.
Mm-hmm.
On the back, if you fit a 30, 32, 34, it doesn't really make much difference because the aero benefit is 3/10 of nothing, and then you're more likely to be on comfort, which is your primary thing. So that's what I would say. But the marketing around it saying, a wider tire or wider wheel is more aerodynamic. I mean, my friends, my engineering colleagues cringe at that statement because it's such a blatantly false statement, and then people are allowed to get away with it.
Has anyone actually said that? I think they said like wider tires are like faster as a package considering rolling resistance potentially. I can't remember a brand saying like a 32 is more aerodynamic than a 25.
I think I was it Hunt, or maybe I've got that wrong. Said that our wheels are wider and therefore faster, and I think Parkour's is another one. They're a brand in the UK. They said something similar, but it's cringeworthy, really. The way it's marketed is just
Okay. Yeah, because I find that that would be odd. That seems strange. I mean, I think a wider
It depends which road you're on as well, Jesse, because you take that bike to Holland where the roads are smooth, the winters aren't that hard. A 23, 25, 28, if you pump them all up to roughly the same pressure, there is a difference, but it's very little. You take that same combination to, I'm saying, the Alps, where the winters are harder and the roads are a bit rougher, you can feel the difference a lot more. And it'll also be affected by the rider weight. Because a heavier weight is going to have a different feel. And another one which people don't really use is the length of the stem. If you make the length of the stem longer, you've got more damping on the handlebars, so it becomes a nicer, plusher ride.
Mm-hmm.
So that's personal preference, but yeah, the fundamentals of it, I think, is utter bollocks.
I'm looking at reserve wheels at the moment. I'm looking at the set of marketing that they're talking about on the website. And full disclosure, I fucking love these wheels. Like, you can't... anyway, people have watched this show and I've heard me... you're not taking them off me because I genuinely think they're a performance gain. And, okay, so I can't see them say that wider is faster, but they certainly do double down on this. Okay, our rims are super wide to suit super wide tires, which is the creation of the first wheel set designed with turbulent aero technology. Do you think there is something in the turbulent aero?
Well, it's been around since the 1930s, turbulent aerofoils, turbulent boundary layers. So I think they've just put it in to spice up the text. But and that's the thing. If people get bamboozled by that. If they don't watch, read up on aerodynamics, they're not going to know the difference. Sounds good though.
In one of their videos, so Reserve Wheel claim to use turbulent air, real world conditions in the wind tunnel. Is that even possible? I thought wind tunnel was all just, what's it, laminar flow, whatever it's called.
Laminar flow. Yeah, you can put louvres into the wind tunnel and it will move the air very quickly. That kind of wind tunnel is quite rare. So in my experience, I only know 2 places that do it.
Okay.
Both of them are military applications. So yeah, they use it for military aircraft because the control surfaces when you are doing an abrupt maneuver are at angles and things that you wouldn't want. So that's what they do it. But there's a big difference between that and like the tour test. The tour test is in steady state conditions. So if you put your SL8 into turbulent air, that's why I say out in the field, your drag number versus your Madone, probably, that overlap will be huge.
So in terms of what Reserve said, it's they are potentially doing something there in their testing and are able to optimize for turbulent wind in the wind tunnel.
They could do now. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, when I put some stuff out, people calling me out saying it's BS, never seen it before, can't do it, blah, 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 blah. Now I've seen a couple of Instagram reels where I think it was a Norwegian time trialist did it and filmed it. And then obviously the reserve wheels as well, there's turbulent flow testing. So,
Okay.
but it is a new thing. But then again, if you're going to measure bikes by it, it's tricky. Wheels I can kind of understand because they're the same size, fit in the same envelope, but
I see.
bike frames are a tricky one.
Can you explain to me why? Well, I suppose the question is, I'm talking about wheels, about rim shapes, the shape of the rim. Why I'm feeling that certain rim shapes at a similar depth to other rims perform better in crosswinds than others. And so again, this is me comparing, stability in crosswinds.
So in like pure engineering terms, instability is defined as a process movement that you generally can't cope with. So if you were to talk about that, you on your bike, when you've got a constant crosswind, you'll tend to sort of cant your bike over and then ride at an angle. That's actually stable. That is stable because you still go in a straight line. When it becomes unstable is, let's say a truck goes past you at very high speed and you've got this sudden shock wave from the front of the truck upsetting your bike. That's unstable. In terms of wheels, you get a pressure difference between one side of the wheel and the other side of the wheel when you're riding in a crosswind. If the pressure differential gets too high, then what will happen is the air around it will collapse and you'll get like a air from the high pressure side moves to the low pressure side. So you're riding along at a constant force. All of a sudden, the airflow cuts away, and then you're having to correct. And it's that correction that you feel is unstable, instability. So certain wheels, certain rim profiles, they limit the sort of the pressure differential before the collapse. So the collapse is the instability. So if you don't have the collapse, the wheel will feel stable. The easiest way to not have a collapse is to have a very shallow rim shape, because the collapse can only happen on a small area. You've got a huge rim shape, so a disc would be a good example. If you have a collapse on that, you've got pressure acting on a huge area, so you would feel it. You'd also feel it more on the front wheel than the back wheel, because the front wheel is a hinged joint. That's why you can usually get away with a deeper back wheel than a front wheel.
Between
Yeah.
different wheels then of the same depth, if you just had a whole bunch of 60 mils, modern ones, not super old V-shaped ones, is what Chris feels between different wheels, is that something else, or is that in the rim shape? Is there savings to be made for the stability in the shape of the rim?
They're fairly close. The big difference will be when you go and fit your tyre on. So if you have a tyre that fits well to the rim, you can improve the stability way more than the actual rim shape itself, because that sort of interface, the transition between where the tyre meets the rim, can have a huge effect on your stability. There is a compromise, because if you have a very stable wheel, they tend to be quite poor in a straight line. I mean, poor is a relative term, but they tend to be slightly slower in a straight line. So if you've got straight head-on wind. So in like Northern Europe, around here, people generally use 50 mil rims, because if you go to 50 to 60, because that's probably the limit of stability. If you go much further than that, then the number of days when you will find the wheel uncontrollable are too high. So, I mean, 50 mil, you'd have to be a pretty windy day.
I guess it's mainly just reserve, isn't it? That you notice it's more stable. Chris.
At this stage, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other difference really is between the carbon spokes and the steel spokes in that same scenario, whether one is better than the other.
I would get carbon. They're lighter, got less rotating weight.
Interesting.
The other thing that is often overlooked is the balance of the wheel. So you tend to find the more expensive wheels are better balanced. Your ride is instantly better, and when you do have an event where the bike becomes unstable because of crosswinds, you're not having to fight the vibration in the wheel as well to correct it. I mean, the vibration in the wheel would probably easily eclipse the 2 watts that difference between bike frames just by balancing them. That's why I don't run tubeless or wheels. I always use tubed, because when you put the tubeless sealant in, it never seals 100%. It sends the wheel out of balance.
You're fascinating. I find the hairs you're willing to split and not split, it's like at odds with, we're literally opposites of like.
We're completely
you could
the
not
opposite.
take tubeless tires off me. They are the lick, as you would say, the shiz. Yeah, I'm almost at all. I don't even know what to say. Oh God.
I wouldn't go for it. I mean, it's not so much the tubeless tire; it's the fact that you have to put the sealant in. So I'll just clarify that and put it into context.
Gotcha.
It's the sealant that's the problem.
So it's the practicality of putting the sealant in that's turning you off, or the effect of putting the sealing in that's throwing the wheel out of balance.
So yeah, when you put the sealant in and then you leave the bike for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months or whatever, the sealant coagulates in the bottom, and then it sends the wheel out of balance, and it's I mean, I could feel it. So you can feel the bike vibrating.
Well, that's what you get for leaving your bike for 2 or 3 months.
Like
I
you've
can
got
ride
like
the
6
thing.
bikes. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
And then the weather conditions are different. Yeah, Australia is nice and warm.
Yeah, but we have like it's the roads aren't great. I just would not. I would not ride a tubed wheel ever again. Ever again. And I'm flabbergasted that anyone would. But I'm not going to argue the point because you've got your methodology on it. So that is what it is.
There's practical reasons for it as well, because if you have to change the tire, or if you get a bad cut in the tire, a tube you usually get you home. Tubeless, you are reliant on the sealant.
Totally disagree. Haven't had a flat. I'm going to say it. I haven't had a flat in 18 months. Now I'm going to get a flat tomorrow. And the two that I have self-sealed, and the one that I remember from 19 months ago, I plugged and got home. In fact, that happened in the US. Don't even carry a tube with me anymore. Just a couple of plugs and a CO2. So, yeah, that's me.
I'm a CPU in a tube kind of guy. So that's what I go for.
Are we deluded, Jesse? Are most people doing that?
At this stage, I don't know.
I just don't know.
It varies regionally.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
I mean, there's other things that people do that I guess around, northern England, Manchester, Leeds way. There's a number of people that use wax on their chain, but there's a load of people that don't, because you just need a bit of inclement weather and the wax, all its friction benefits are just wiped out in one rain shower. That's it. Just literally like that. Cold temperatures, boom, it just flies off. So that's just a regional variation. And I think you got to realise that I think that thing is most people who ride bikes aren't at the elite end of the spectrum. They're just riding along, probably club riders or whatever. But you guys are at that very top. Look at the bikes you ride. I'm not looking about the Tavelo, but it's fun.
But isn't tubeless more practical? Like I rode past so many people on Saturday, pulled over the side of the road, plugging out this fucking tube, putting another one in. For me, I'll be honest, it's a pure practicality. As is the waxed chain is a practicality thing for me. But yeah, again, regionally, I'm not riding in sleet, so that's true.
And some people say the sealant's not so effective in cold temperatures either. I can kind of understand the seal as well. So, but fundamentally, I think the one thing that for me is there is some evidence growing that tubeless wheels, basically hookless wheels, are not as strong as the hooked variety. Because if you look, I can't remember who crashed the other week. Went round a roundabout, hit a pothole, and smashed his rim, and then the tire came straight off.
That was a rider, a Giant sponsored rider on a KDX rim, and
a KDX tire,
and so it came out in the news. KDX came back and said it's not the hookless rim's fault because he crashed. That caused it, and you're like, well, if you not crash because he hit a pothole, and then the tire and then that cracked the rim, and then the tire flew off. But the whole point is you should be able to hit a pothole and the rim doesn't. If you have a bead, that's the whole point. It holds the tire on. So it was it was kind of like they admitted, in a way, it was because the rim was hookless. But I don't think that's what they thought they were doing. They were kind of just blaming the rim cracking.
Well, that's a big thing. And you're going on about legislation and stuff like that, testing and stuff like that. I think there'll be a lot more scrutiny around that kind of wheel, around the hookless wheel, because it's fine when it's running, but you look at the number of incidents where someone has gone over a pothole or hit a roundabout or whatever it is, and then just 200 meters down the road, the tires come off. It's quite frequent, in comparison,
and kind of for almost no benefit. Like for what?
What benefits do you see from your tubeless wheel, Chris?
Oh, vastly superior comfort. I would argue
But
faster
Chris doesn't
rolling.
ride. The reserve
I
rims
don't
are
ride
hooked. They're
hookless
not.
wheels.
They're not hookless.
I don't ride hooked.
Oh,
Yeah,
just
mine
tubeless.
are all hooked.
If someone's looking at a new set of wheels, you see all the time that you can get the ceramic bearing as like an option when you purchase it. It might be an extra $100 or something. Should people be doing that? Is it a good investment?
In my opinion, no. In the opinion of the bearing manufacturers and the big ones, NTN, SKF, Toyama, they all say no as well. The reasons for that are quite straightforward when you think about it. The ceramic balls are quite hard. The metal that they're going against is comparatively soft, so the vibration tends to wear them out. That's why your car wheel bearings are usually metal. Even F1 car bearings, are metal. So I would say no. There's a market for it, and people just see ceramic and then go for it. But they're the real reasons for it. Yeah, I think it's ironic because the ceramic speed guy used to work for SKF before he was ceramic speed, so he'll know that, but he doesn't publish any data on it. So there you go. He's built the brand. He's done well to build the brand.
What is when you like a regular steel bearing wheel? You spin it. Like there's no friction. How much could you potentially even be saving with a ceramic bearing, even when it's out of the box, no contamination?
If you changed every bearing on it, probably half a watt, if that. But then if you ride down the road for 500 or 600 kilometers, you would probably find the steel bearing is faster
Hmm.
because it's bedded in, and it's a lot faster if you are on rough ground because the vibration it's basically like taking a locomotive, so a train, and then riding it along the road because you've got those steel wheels digging into the tarmac. Whereas if you put something that's around the same hardness, so a car tire, onto the road, it doesn't cause as much wear.
Do you have any ceramic bearings on your bike, Chris, on your S5?
No. Just stock, mate. Just run stock.
Just, yeah.
I mean, in Australia, you probably wouldn't need the corrosion properties anyway.
No one's no one's buying ceramic speed here for corrosion properties. They're buying it for.
I like this on the S5 or Tavelo. What's a better bike? Hambini decides.
Oh yeah.
I think the S5 is a better bike. Want some context?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why?
go on.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm
Chinese
just preempting.
dog. There we go.
I'm just doing I'm preempting your reasoning, and I actually have no idea how you're gonna spin this one. Yeah. Let's go.
So the latest S5, I believe, is made in the same factory as the Cannondale because they're all PON group.
Or pon.
PON, and I rate their latest manufacturing quite highly. So that's one aspect. The other thing is, if you are at a group ride with a Tavelo S5, you've instantly got way more credibility than anyone with a frame that's been marketed by a load of YouTube influencers, including myself. So therefore, get the S5. Get you more chicks.
Yeah.
I'm a bit old for that now, but there you go.
Do you think that handlebar thing? Do you think you'll see a few more brands playing around with that type of? Because it's surprised me more brands haven't copied that.
Handlebars is an area where you could get aerodynamic improvement because it's the first thing that hits the air.
Mm.
There's a lot of investment that someone have to put in to make a handlebar like that. They'd probably be better off just buying an off-the-shelf frame.
Okay.
Because I think about it commercially, whereas you guys, I get the impression, think about it more from aesthetics or what will sell or what will be engineering. Whereas I'm there thinking with a cold heart hat on, thinking,
What's the bottom line? Yeah.
what's the bottom line? And that's the crux of it. I mean, the hammering the bike industry has taken means that for a new brand to come along is extremely difficult. So it's only the big players that are left behind I think will be there and innovate to an extent. Even the innovations, I think, gotten. I mean, what do you think's innovated in the past 20 years? Where do you think innovations come? And I'll give you my views.
Oh, like I'll even if I compare even I wouldn't even don't even need to go back 20 years. Like if I compare the giant TCR rim brake frame and then moving to the Tavelo, this move to disc brakes, move to an Aero tweaked frame, tubeless. I already had tubeless on the TCR. Like the ride experience, the comfort, I still have my gripes with disc brakes because like I need to go back and they're gone all spongy for whatever reason. They just decided the lever throw decided to go off. So I have my annoyances with like the maintenance of the disc brakes. But like if you took a rider that only got into cycling, 2 years ago and bought an SL8 and put them on a 2005 TCR with 23mm tires tubed. Actually, that's probably not even a good example because that's not even an aero bike. If you took a fit right, if you took Chris, took him off his S5 and put him back on, a bike from 15 years ago with tubes, no aero features, rim brakes, like your riding experience, mechanical shifting, not electronic. To me, it's like a monumental difference. It's huge. In almost every pick a component, and it's incredibly much better ride experience and way faster. I mean, it's just I'm not like cynical on the improvements. I think it's been insane.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, but it's the whole system thing for me. It's just everything's faster and more comfortable. It's a ball ache. I'm not going to pretend to argue that. But even if I look at the performance side of it, at our level of stuff, I know this sounds lame, but like the speeds are just crazy fast at what we do at like a little club level now. It's a joke compared to what it used to be. It doesn't feel like you're going any faster. And the power isn't getting any higher. But the whole setups are. So, and I look at guys coming into the sport now and the way that they're experiencing it from the equipment that they're using, it's just vastly different, all the way down to the actual like kit that they're wearing. It's an entirely different class of kit that was being worn only 10 years ago. So I don't know. I just can't get cynical about the improvements. I'm kind of sorry. Yeah, stuff like hookless shit me, but ultimately, I think it's a vastly superior, including tubeless, riding scenario.
I think I've got mixed views on it. I think some things have gotten better and some things have gotten worse. So I think the component level has gotten worse. So if, for example, I've got a time bike. So the time bike from 6 or 7 years ago came with an NTN headset, very, very clever steering system. The new one doesn't. It comes with some off-the-shelf crap from FSA, which doesn't fit very well. Yeah, you have to go and do a lot of fettling around it, and then it works. The other bits are the complexity has increased. So this business about internal routing of cables and things looks real great until you get a problem. Because if you live in Northern Europe, the headset bearings on your bike will get trashed because of just the inclement weather. And when you have to go and change it, you have to take half the bike apart to change these two pissing bearings. And I think that's gotten worse. And then the technical things that you've said, I'm certainly one for the electronic shifting. I think that's been a vast improvement. But then some of the other things I disagree with. So the hydraulic brakes are better, but it also comes at a cost. And it's not something that I think is necessarily worth it. So this rim brake you can adjust with a screwdriver. or a hex wrench or something like that, and obviously you can take it on a plane. Whereas the hydraulic brakes, the complexity has changed. It almost feels like they've introduced it to be able to sell something rather than improve something. And that's it from an engineering perspective. There'll be loads of people probably in the comments that go, Hambini hates rim brakes. It's just, my opinion. Do I value the speed more than...
I think the comments will side with you over us.
That's really interesting. Like,
I don't think so.
It is good though. Yeah.
Like on the rim brake thing, like if I could if somehow some brand continued developing a rim brake frame over the last really 10 years, would I give up, let's say a Tavelo S5 to move to the Tavelo S5 ultra advanced rim brake model and get the slightly faster speed and the easier maintenance? Or would I pick the disc brake version for the better braking performance? I actually think it's a hard question. And I think part of the reason why it's hard is I can't really remember how bad rim brakes are because I haven't ridden them it's been about a year since I've done like a full month of training only with rim brakes in different conditions.
It's a
I would probably side and say I would probably take faffing off to the bike shop every couple of months for living in Sydney to get better braking. I think I would. Maybe I'm deluding myself.
Skirty, oily, slippery wet on Saturday, and I'm coming down to Kuna Bay, and I've got the one like the new SRAM braking is a joke. Like it's literally, I know it's marketing crap, but it is like one-fingered braking coming down there and just going down a descent, which is chop liver crap with wet and having absolutely not a concern in any way, shape or form, rolling a 55 PSI tire over this stuff. I would never, ever, ever change that for an additional trip to the bike shop. I'm sorry. But again, this is someone who, hands in the air, does not do their bike maintenance.
You've basically got your personal mechanic.
I just say, and a lot of people, I like going to the bike shop, chatting to the boys, seeing what's going on. There's a bit of a chat, what's going on here, what's going on there. It's all part of the scene. So I don't know. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. It's just so easy to break.
It's interesting to people's views, isn't it? It's quite... You see the reasons why they want to do it, their own personal circumstances.
What have you been doing on the bike? So you said FTP's gone up to 320 watts. How come? What happened? What have you been up to?
So I think I mentioned earlier, I got enrolled in a study for one group of doctors managing a load of clients and one group of fitness professional coaches managing a set of clients to see which was more effective. So I was in the doctors cohort and there was 10 of us and then 10 in the fitness professionals or the coaches cohort. And then after 6 or 7 months, all got back together and did a repeat fitness test. The methodologies that the doctors took was slightly different to what the coaches took. So the coaches took like a structured plan. So they were sort of doing 3 weeks of intense training, 1 week rest week, 3 weeks training, this, that, and the other. They were just literally following that. The doctors cohort, they were using, basically I was getting my blood checked every few days, and then the hairdresser was coming along, checking various parameters, this, that, and the other, and then tailoring it on an almost daily basis with food, training, and all that kind of stuff to increment the improvement. So it has been quite dramatic, that improvement, and that's what I was doing for a while.
Was that study? Did you say that study was 6 months, or was that just a part of it, and then you just continued it after?
I'm still on it. I'm still doing it. But the study initially was for 6 months. So they put a point in and then took those measured values. There's people still doing it, and then they're going to do it after 12 months to see how much of a gain there has been. But it's been a real eye opener for me because I wasn't really that fussed, to be honest. I mean, I wouldn't say I enjoy riding a bike that much. I just generally use it to get from A to B and keep fit and stuff like that. So yeah, but then the fitness improvement, it kind of makes you motivated because you just go from being an also ran to sometimes being, way up the board, the pecking order.
That's an insane improvement in 6 months. How did you test?
Crazy.
So 320 watt FTP base. How was that tested?
So that's tested in a lab. So the NHS, National Health Service, is the government controlling health service body. The hairdresser is and the other doctors, they're all NHS pretty much. And then they go to one of the universities, and it's like a teaching hospital basically. So there's the university part of the education, and then the hospital part is another part, and then it's tested. So it's tested in a lab condition. So you have to have the FTP and then VO2 max. So they put the mask around you, and then you can go running along, and then stuff like that. The acid test, so the one they use is a very good indicator if you don't have the sort of the elaborate test equipment, is a 5k and 10k time. So if you just run with those just by yourself, 5k and then run 10k, they are very good indicators of your FTP and your VO2 max in their opinion. I mean, I'm not a doctor,
so did the test they did in the lab, was that on the bike though?
Yeah, it was on the bike.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I thought.
And what was the protocol for the FTP test? Was it a 20-minute test or a ramp test?
It was
a full hour.
Full hour.
Yes, yes. Good.
What you like to hear.
None of this rap test and take a percent. Just what can you do for an hour?
That's a good solid lock in.
So
Man.
that's a I'm interested how you got fit so quickly. How many hours a week riding were you doing?
I mean, it was a mixture. It wasn't just that. I mean, there was a bit of weight training in there, a bit of running, bit of circuit training, all of that lot in there. But then the riding was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours a week, if that.
What?
It wasn't very much. Wasn't very much at all.
You've got an FTP of 320 watts on 3 hours a week of training.
No. I don't mean like 3 or 4 hours a week just by itself. There was a load of other stuff in there with it. Loads of other stuff. So strength training, running, all that. That contributes quite a lot to it. There's also a genetic element because the hairdresser says that depending on, like ethnic elements and all that kind of stuff, that has an effect. So I've got a resting heart rate of 38 now, beats per minute. So it's gone right down. So she thinks that I've been born with a disproportionately big heart.
Clearly talented.
So the blood pressure's quite low. It doesn't go very high either. So I've ended up with 320. There's 3 or 4. I mean, it varied. I've probably done the average there. Sometimes it might have been 6 or 7 hours, but it wasn't lots of miles. It was high intensity, very short things. And then everyone's going to be different, but yeah, it ended up at 320. So that's where I am.
Did before that, did you just ride like for commuting? Is that
pretty much
before you tested at 200?
Yeah.
Right.
That's it. And then my other interesting hobbies like drinking, I had to cut that down. And then and the diet changed quite a bit. So they were the main things. But it gets more difficult as you get older. So that's the.
So were you doing structured sessions for the bike work? Were you doing like workouts on the trainer or on the road? What were you?
Mainly on a. Well, it varied. If the weather was good outside, then I'd take it outside. But I don't live in Australia, so sometimes it's like hammer it down or sleet or whatever, and then I go on a turbo trainer. But the actual things that she picked, she did it in conjunction with a cardiologist. So between them, they figured out where I was and then how much to push me in order to get the maximum gain. I mean, some days I was just like absolutely stuffed, completely stuffed.
So like, were they kind of like hour sessions, and you're doing like 40, 20 intervals, or like what would a session be like?
It wasn't even as structured as that. It would just vary, and she'd say, go do 10 minutes at X wattage, or go and run up the road at 3 minutes per kilometer for 2 minutes, or something like that. It changed every day pretty much. It wasn't structured like that.
This is wild.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see it. I mean, if you look at the last video when I was pretending to be out the 80s in my gay tank top.
Yeah, watch that one. Yeah. Yeah, both Jesse and I went, Jesus Christ. It's got juicy all of a sudden.
The physical difference was quite dramatic. So, yeah, I mean, I did say I was on the juice. I'm not being on the juice, but I just did it for the hits. But I mean, it's quite dramatic, the change. So it's not like it doesn't work. It's very, very effective.
Oh, congratulations. And are you intending to maintain this sort of regime as such?
No, I don't know.
No,
I don't have that much of it depends what motivates you, doesn't it? I think if I get my time of 36, 37 minutes, 10K running time, I'll be happy, and then just call it a day at that. So
you could take on Dave Arthur at the Fred Whitten this year. That's a big showdown.
I don't really like riding. I mean, I know one of your questions is around club rides, and do I do club rides? I don't really enjoy that because I'm worried of crashing. That's it. I mean, there's things that I can't do that people often ask me, why don't I film myself riding myself on a bike? It's because I can't ride a bike with no hands. So, yeah, that's why, because I'm just useless without it.
Oh, that's awesome. This is a follow-up episode here, a deep dive into this training regime.
You put it on? Are you on Strava or something?
I don't do Strava. I don't do anything.
Keeps it
that's
dark.
Just too.
Jesse's on this sort of long-winded plan to become a verified Strava athlete.
They won't verify me.
He's just
not a pro athlete.
Like selling
Badge
himself
as a verified
everywhere.
athlete. Can't get it. They're not interested. But it's like my life goal.
He'll send me the link of some other verified athlete and be like, how dare they verify this guy? Here I am sitting here.
I didn't even know there was such a thing. Do you have to pay for it?
No, it's a life goal for Jesse.
No, you got to apply.
Can.
I've submitted the form so many times. I'm like, fucking Coyle's applied again. And then if you're well known enough, they'll verify you. Yeah.
I mean, what benefit do you get from it?
You get a tick, don't you?
You get a tick. I just love Strava. I've up I'm not joking. Every ride I've ever done is on Strava.
I will get home from some mundane training ride, and within seconds of it being up, and Jesse's not my coach, I'll get a text from him and be like, PR up Montague Street or something. I'm like, what? How did you even... Like, do you just have alerts for everything?
How do you find the time to stay motivated? So if you've got families and other commitments and stuff like that, time becomes pressure. I have a day job to do. I don't do cycling influencing for my primary job. Now, if you take, I use Dave Arthur as an example because he's a good one. He does it full time and he has to make a living from it. Obviously, the cycling industry is taking a hit, and I imagine his income follows that as a whole, follows it because it's taking a hit. What do you think will happen to those kind of influences? And what do you think, how do you find your time to be motivated? I guess there's two questions in there.
In terms of staying motivated, I need to exercise. I'm like a dog. It's like you got to take the dog for a walk. And so when my son was born and you get busier, Like, yeah, I'm okay to step back from riding or exercising, but like it's to me, it's not like I need to get motivated. Well, I kind of do need to get motivated to do it again, but it's not an option. I can't kind of just go 6 months and just riding once a week. I'm not right in the head, so I just have to find time to do it, and it's not like I'm doing 15 hours a week. It's just like my kind of minimum level is I need to ride like 3 or 4 days a week. As an actual ride, not just like commuting to the shops. Even if it's just an hour and a half, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit weird, but it's not really finding motivation to do it. I have to for my mental health, and yeah, so I just have to find the time to fit it in.
How many hours do you do a week?
Now it's like not that high. I go to the gym once a week, twice if I can, to do strength training, and then I do usually about 6 hours on the bike, 6 to 8, if it's a good week.
I'm in a sort of different place to Jesse. Kids are older. Catherine's 11th birthday was yesterday, and Kira's 9. And two things. So I do regret trying to ride as much as I did when the kids were super young, because they're only 18 months apart. I do regret that, and I would change that, but ultimately, I'm in a different place now. They're both at school, so it's different when you know you're going to get a good night's sleep, like you didn't when you had 2 kids under 2. So yeah, obviously, I have a little bit more structured time available to myself then. As far as like the motivation thing goes, that's also really personal. So there's 2 things. I've always played sport. My entire family has always played sport, whether it be cricket, rugby, skiing, and now it's cycling. I play sport. That's what I do. It's part of my life. But also, there's this other thing that's been going on with me where I have sort of done this thing where it's taken me years, about 3-4 years, to sort of change a lot about my own physiology and life. Vegan, very, very skinny. Vegan wasn't the cause of it, but whatever. And dug myself quite a few holes when it came to everything about my body and system. And it took a long time to turn that around. And in the last 12 to 18 months, I have turned that around. And a big part of that's been sleep, no alcohol, strength training, different types of training. And I'm actually now seeing gains in my own riding like I haven't seen for like 10 years. So I'm actually uber motivated again because all of a sudden the needle started moving and it didn't move for years and it went backwards. So it's kind of weird. I know that's a weird answer. It's not really a very helpful answer. It's a very personal answer. But yeah, that's kind of, I suppose, where I'm at the moment, obsessed with sport and the needle's moving, so I'm kind of motivated to keep going. As far as the cycling media thing, man, it's an interesting one. I think we're in an interesting position in YouTube where a lot of the brands and things are shunning what's happening in this space and going to a safer place on Instagram where there's less engagement, but there's the chance, and we had that VC Let's Get It guy on here. He's like, they're all just into something going viral. Something has to go viral. Doesn't matter what it is, but that's what you're all looking for. And there's more chance of that happening on a reel than there is on an 8-minute review of a Tavelo. Like that's the reality. So yeah, where that leaves the YouTube crowd, I actually don't have an answer for that, to be honest. It's going to be an interesting period, especially with professional cycling stepping back from being, on free-to-air television in the UK, and that side diminishing as well. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for it, but I think short form's gonna face a lot of the shill commentary that YouTube faced a couple of years ago, because that's ultimately where the shills are. Let's call it what it is now, like a fitness industry. So we'll see. What do you think?
market has changed completely. So I think that no one can really argue with it. Bottom's fallen out of it. In terms of the media, what I see is there's been a bit of a hammering for the UK media. Eurosport going and making cycling paid subscribed service is going to have a negative effect because there's a load of little kids that aren't going to see Chris Froome or Bradley Wiggins or whatever on TV. That has an effect, but the trickle down effect is the cycling magazines like Cycling Weekly, Bike Radar, all this lot. Their advertising revenue or their wannabe journalists aren't going to be wanting to do that anymore. They'll pick something else, which is a lot more visible because in 10 years from now, if you go to someone in the pub and say, yeah, I'm a bike journalist, they're going to like be, well, who's winning the Tour de France or this, that, and the other? They just won't know. And I think, yeah, Eurosport's taken that decision now, but I think the outcome of it or the things that will happen will probably manifest themselves in 5 or 6 years, and that's when it will be decimated. The media as a whole, and one person told me this, is influenced, the cycling media is influenced significantly by companies that are basically within a 20-mile radius of Bristol.
Yeah, you told me that. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got Bike Radar, Cycling Weekly, Road CC. They're all Bristol Bath kind
GCN.
of area. GCN's another one, and Dave Arthur. So there's a big chunk of it in there. And financially, GCN's. I thought it was coming a couple of years ago. I made a video predictions for 2022, and I said GCN's going to get hammered, and I didn't think it would go the way it has done with it being offloaded and sold back to the original founder, but their viewership's gone right down. Their number of paid promotions that they have with various bike companies has gone right down, and a lot of their high-profile presenters have left. So there was Manon Lloyd who left, and I forgot the other chap who went to do Eurosport commentary as well.
Oh, Matt Stevens.
Matt Stevens, yeah, he left. So he had a load of them go, and that GCN Plus has gone as well. So now they've gone back to the old sort of documentary style videos, which I thought were quite good, but I don't know how viable that is because, yeah, they're getting 500,000 hits from it, but the backroom staff, there's loads of people who work there. You got to pay for them a lot. And is it viable? I would doubt it. So that's happening. But the other thing is, and I don't know if it happens so much in Australia, is the way the bikes are sold have changed. So, as I alluded to this earlier, instead of people going into bike shops, they're buying them online, getting them delivered to their house. And the role of the bike shop's gone from being a point of sale and a point of service, a bit like a car dealer, to just being a point of service. And in the COVID lockdowns, there was loads of people who became bike mechanics who were just servicing bikes. Now that market's diminishing because people are getting bored of their bikes and getting e-bikes or e-scooters. I mean, e-scooters are so popular now that I think that market's going. And people go on about the bike industry recovery. I don't think it'll happen. I think this is just the new norm.
But from the roadside, does it potentially just shift around? Like, okay, it dies off in the UK, but then China have a World Tour team, and does it just shift? Does it just shift over to there, and then suddenly we have to do the NERO show in Mandarin?
I think the move towards the east is inevitable because those companies, they've got a booming local market. So they're being funded by all the bikes they're selling in China. They're just moving west. And Chinese manufacturing technology in carbon is probably the world leader for mass market carbon manufacturing. Why would they want to go and have some other company squeeze their profit margin when they can start to build their brand and then start selling directly? So Windspace is a prime example. 5-6 years ago, they were selling direct. Now, I mean, I've got a Windspace SLC3. I had a problem with the Windspace bike. All of my dealer support was handled within the UK, so I needed a spare part. Just rang the guy up, and he sent me the part next day. And away we go. So they've gone from being direct to market to now having a semi-retail business. Admittedly, as a geographical level, it's covering the whole of the UK. But before they had nothing, so you were dealing with directly from China. That's the way they're going. And some of the wheel manufacturers as well have started doing that. So they have dealer service in those countries.
All right, lads, I think we should probably wrap it up. It's well past my bedtime. Thank you so much, Hambini, for coming on. We really appreciate it. I know we've been dancing around this for a while, but it's awesome to get you on. And yeah, hopefully we can do it again at some point soon enough.
Look forward to it. Thanks, 8-year-old, and thanks, hairdresser, for the company.
Legend. All right, we'll chat to you soon.